Hi, I'm Elina. I'm a pediatric nurse from Boston, and I've spent the last 8 years working night shifts at Children's Hospital, saving every penny I could to help my family back home in Ohio. But 3 weeks before my little sister's wedding, the wedding I'd been planning to attend since she got engaged, I received a text message that would change everything. You're banned from coming. Don't make this about you. Have you ever felt like you were invisible in your own family? Like no matter what you did, it was never enough, never seen, never appreciated? Because that's exactly how I felt staring at that message from my mother at 2 a.m. after a 12-hour shift, still in my scrubs, with the plane ticket I'd already bought sitting on my kitchen counter. But here's what my family didn't know when they sent that text. I had already written a letter that would find its way to that altar, whether I was there or not. A letter that would make 600 wedding guests fall completely silent. And the person who would read it out loud wouldn't be me. The thing is, when you're the family scapegoat, you learn to expect the worst, but you never really prepare for how it feels when it actually happens. So let me ask you, what would you do if your own family banned you from the most important day of your sister's life? Because what I did next, well, it changed everything. Sarah had always been the golden child. I don't say that with bitterness anymore, it's just a fact. Like saying the sky is blue or that Ohio winters are brutal. From the moment she was born when I was 7, it was clear that she was special, precious, the one who could do no wrong. And I was the one who was supposed to make sure nothing ever went wrong for her. Growing up, I was Sarah's built-in babysitter, her homework helper, her personal ATM when she wanted something our parents said no to. When she wanted to quit piano lessons after 2 months, I convinced mom and dad to let her switch to dance. When she failed her driving test twice, I paid for extra lessons with my summer job money. When she got into her dream college but couldn't afford the dorm deposit, guess who worked double shifts at the local diner to help cover it? I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because it explains why, when I got that text message, part of me wasn't even surprised. It was just the latest in a long pattern of being erased whenever it was convenient for my family. The message came from my mother's phone, but I knew it had been a family decision. That's how it always worked in our house. Sarah would get upset about something, mom would panic about Sarah being upset, dad would side with mom to keep the peace, and somehow, some way, it would become my fault. My responsibility to fix. My job to disappear so everyone else could be happy. But this time was different. This time they weren't asking me to fix something. They were asking me to not exist. The backstory of how I got banned is almost laughably small when you think about it. 3 weeks earlier, I had called Sarah to ask about bridesmaid dress fittings. I wasn't even a bridesmaid. That honor went to her 3 college friends and our cousin Jessica. I was just wondering if there was anything I could do to help. Any way I could be involved in my own sister's wedding. Elina, Sarah had said, and I could hear that tone. The one that meant I had somehow already messed up. I really need this day to be perfect. I can't handle any drama right now. What drama? I asked. I just wanted to know if you needed help with anything. See, this is what I'm talking about. You're making this about you again. Why can't you just let me have this one day without making it complicated? I had stared at my phone, genuinely confused. Sarah, I literally just asked if you needed help. How is that making it about me? But by then, she had already hung up. And apparently she had immediately called mom, crying about how I was being difficult and trying to insert myself into everything and making her wedding stressful. Within an hour, mom called me back. Elina, honey, I think it might be best if you don't come to the wedding. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Mom, are you serious? Sarah is just so stressed, and you know how sensitive she gets before big events. Remember her high school graduation? You asking questions about the dinner reservations made her have a panic attack. I did remember her high school graduation. I remembered asking if we needed to confirm our reservation at the restaurant because I wanted to make sure they had enough space for everyone. I remembered Sarah screaming at me for trying to control everything and locking herself in her room. I remembered spending the evening apologizing for trying to help while everyone acted like I had ruined the entire day. Mom, that was 8 years ago, and I was just trying to make sure. Elina, please, just this once. Can you think about someone other than yourself? And there it was, the line that had been thrown at me my entire life. Anytime I had a need, an opinion, a feeling that didn't align perfectly with what Sarah wanted, I was being selfish. I was making it about me. I was the problem. But what my family never seemed to understand is that I had spent 28 years thinking about everyone other than myself. I had chosen a college close to home so I could help with Sarah's activities. I had taken out extra student loans so I could send money home when Dad lost his job. I had worked every holiday for the past 5 years so I could afford to fly home for family visits and bring expensive gifts for everyone. And now, when my baby sister was getting married, the sister I had helped raise, had protected from bullies, had taught to drive, had held when she cried over her first heartbreak, I was being told I couldn't even attend her wedding because my presence might make her uncomfortable. Fine, I said to my mother, my voice barely a whisper. I won't come. Oh, honey, you understand. I knew you would. You're so mature about these things. Mature. That was another word I'd heard my whole life. Mature enough to handle disappointment. Mature enough to put my needs last. Mature enough to disappear when my existence became inconvenient. After I hung up, I sat in my small Boston apartment for 3 hours, just staring at the wedding invitation on my refrigerator. Sarah's elegant script had written +1 welcome on the bottom, back when she thought my presence would be a gift rather than a burden. That's when I decided to write the letter. I want to be clear about something. When I started writing that letter, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about ruining Sarah's day or getting back at my family for 28 years of making me feel invisible. It was about finally saying goodbye. See, being banned from Sarah's wedding wasn't just about missing one day. It was about understanding, finally and completely, that I would never be truly welcome in my own family. That no matter what I did, how much I sacrificed, how many times I put their needs before my own, I would always be expendable. So I wrote the letter as a way of setting myself free. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold hours ago, and I started writing. Not the angry letter that part of me wanted to write. Not the bitter letter that listed every slight, every disappointment, every time I had been overlooked or dismissed. Instead, I wrote the letter I wish I could have given Sarah in person. The letter that said everything I had never been allowed to say. I wrote about the time she was 10, and kids at school were bullying her for wearing glasses. How I had marched up to the biggest bully, a 6th grader named Marcus who was twice my size, and told him that if he ever looked at my sister wrong again, he'd have to deal with me. How I got detention for a week after Marcus told the principal I had threatened him, but how Sarah never found out because I made sure she didn't have to worry about bullies anymore. I wrote about her junior year of high school when she was convinced she was pregnant after missing her period for 6 weeks. How she was too scared to tell anyone, so she called me at 3 a.m. sobbing. How I drove 4 hours from college, bought 3 pregnancy tests, and held her hand while we waited for the results. How when they came back negative, I held her while she cried about how scared she had been. How I never told anyone, not even when she later claimed she had never been sexually active when Mom asked about birth control. I wrote about the night before she left for college, when she climbed into my bed like she used to when we were little, and told me she was terrified of leaving home. How I stayed up all night, reassuring her that she was going to be amazing, that college was going to be the best time of her life, that I would always be just a phone call away if she needed anything. How I meant every word. But I also wrote about the things she didn't know. About how I had worked 3 jobs one summer to help pay for her SAT prep course, telling her the money came from scholarship funds. About how I had taken the blame for scratching Dad's car when she borrowed it without permission, because I knew he would take away her driving privileges right before prom. About how I had convinced our cousin Jessica not to tell anyone about seeing Sarah cheating on her ACTs because I knew it would destroy her college prospects. I wrote about all the phone calls that went unanswered, all the visits home where I felt like a guest in my own childhood bedroom, all the family photos where I somehow ended up cropped out or standing at the edge like an afterthought. And finally, I wrote about how much I loved her, how proud I was of the woman she had become, how I hoped that someday she might understand that love isn't just about being there for the good times. It's about being there for everything, even when nobody notices, even when nobody thanks you, even when you're told your presence is unwelcome. The letter was 7 pages long when I finished it. 7 pages of everything I had never been allowed to say, everything I had swallowed down for the sake of family peace, everything I had hidden so that Sarah could have the perfect, uncomplicated love of a family that never questioned her, never challenged her, never asked her to consider how her actions affected other people. Reading it back, I realized it wasn't angry at all. It was just honest. And maybe that was going to be the most radical thing I had ever done. Telling my family the truth about who I was and what I had given up for them. But here's the thing about truth. Once you write it down, you have to decide what to do with it. I printed the letter on good paper, the kind I used for important documents at the hospital. I folded it carefully and put it in an envelope addressed to Sarah. And then I stared at it for 2 days, trying to decide if I had the courage to send it. That's when I called Uncle Mike. Uncle Mike was my father's younger brother, and he had always been different from the rest of my family. He was the one who remembered my birthday every year, who asked about my job when everyone else forgot I was a nurse, who seemed to actually see me when I was in the room. If anyone in my family might understand what I was going through, it would be him. Elina. His voice was warm when he answered, like it always was. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Are you excited about Sarah's big day? The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. Uncle Mike, I need to tell you something. I told him everything. About the phone call, about being banned, about the letter. I told him about feeling invisible and expendable and tired of pretending it didn't hurt. And Uncle Mike listened without interrupting, without making excuses, without telling me I was being too sensitive or dramatic. When I finished, there was a long silence. Jesus, Elina, he said finally. I had no idea I knew things were complicated, but I didn't realize. You don't have to say anything, I said quickly. I just needed someone to know. I'm not even asking you to take sides. I just needed one person in our family to hear me. I'm going to that wedding, Uncle Mike said. And I think Sarah needs to read that letter. Mike, no, I don't want to ruin her day. That's not what this is about. Elina, honey, you're not ruining anything. But that girl needs to understand what she's losing, what the whole family is losing. That's when Uncle Mike told me something I didn't know. He told me that he had been watching our family dynamics for years, watching me get pushed aside and overlooked and blamed for things that weren't my fault. He told me that he had tried to speak up before, but that my parents shut him down every time, saying he didn't understand the full situation. But I do understand, he said. I understand that you've been carrying this family on your back for years, and they've been so busy protecting Sarah from any discomfort that they never stopped to think about how much discomfort you were carrying. Uncle Mike promised me that he would give Sarah the letter before the wedding. Not to cause drama, but because he believed she had a right to know what kind of love she was rejecting, what kind of sister she was losing. And Elina, he said before we hung up, I'm proud of you for writing that letter. It takes courage to tell the truth, even when you know it might not change anything. But what Uncle Mike didn't tell me, what I wouldn't find out until later, was that he wasn't planning to just give Sarah the letter. He was planning to give it to someone else too. Someone who was going to make sure that letter got read out loud in front of 600 people. Someone who was going to make sure that the truth about our family finally came to light, whether my parents wanted it to or not. Sarah's fiancé, David, was going to make sure of that. What I didn't know when I hung up the phone with Uncle Mike was that David Chen, Sarah's fiancé, had been having his own doubts about my family for months. He'd been noticing things, small things at first, then bigger ones, that didn't sit right with him. The way conversations stopped when I called during family dinners. The way my parents would exchange glances whenever Sarah mentioned me. The way my chair was always the first one removed when they needed extra space at the table. David was a criminal defense attorney, which meant he was trained to notice patterns, inconsistencies, and lies. And my family, it turned out, had been telling a lot of lies about me. Uncle Mike found David 3 days after our phone call at what was supposed to be a casual pre-wedding dinner at my parents' house. Mike had driven in from Cincinnati, officially to help with last-minute wedding preparations, but really to deliver my letter and see if he could understand how things had gotten so twisted. "I need to show you something," Mike told David, pulling him aside while my parents and Sarah were arguing about seating arrangements in the kitchen. "It's about Elina." David's face immediately shifted. "What about Elina? Sarah said she couldn't make it because of work." That was the first lie Uncle Mike caught them in. Sarah hadn't told David that she'd banned me. She'd told him I couldn't get time off from the hospital. A small lie, maybe, but it was the crack that would eventually bring down the entire wall of deception my family had built around my absence. Uncle Mike handed David my letter. "She wrote this after they told her not to come. I think you should read it." David took the envelope back to his hotel room that night. He told me later that he almost didn't open it, that part of him wanted to respect what he thought was my privacy. But something about Uncle Mike's expression, something about the careful way he'd handed over the letter, made David realize this wasn't just family drama. This was something bigger. He read my letter 3 times that night. The first time, he read it like Sarah's fiancé, looking for signs that I was being dramatic or manipulative, trying to understand why my family would ban their own daughter from a wedding. The second time, he read it like a lawyer, looking for inconsistencies or exaggerations that might explain the family's version of events. The third time, he read it like a human being who was starting to realize that the woman he was about to marry came from a family that had systematically erased their eldest daughter for 28 years. David called Uncle Mike at 2 a.m. "Is all of this true?" His voice was shaky. "The things she wrote about, did all of that really happen?" "Every word," Uncle Mike said. "And that's just what she remembered to write down. There's a lot more." That's when Uncle Mike started telling David stories I'd never even shared in my letter. Stories about family vacations where I worked double shifts to afford the trip, then spent the entire vacation taking care of everyone else's needs. Stories about Christmas mornings where my gifts were clearly afterthoughts. Generic gift cards while Sarah got thoughtful. Expensive presents that showed someone had actually listened to what she wanted. Uncle Mike told David about the time I was hospitalized with pneumonia during my junior year of college, and how my parents didn't visit because it was Sarah's homecoming weekend, and they couldn't miss her being crowned princess. How I spent 4 days alone in a hospital room, getting visits from my roommate's parents because my own family was too busy celebrating my sister. But the worst part, Uncle Mike said, is that they've convinced themselves they're protecting Sarah by keeping Elina at arm's length. They've decided that Elina is difficult and dramatic, and they've created this whole narrative where excluding her is actually an act of love. David was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked the question that would change everything. "Does Sarah know? I mean, really know what her family has done to her sister?" "I don't think so," Uncle Mike said. "I think Sarah genuinely believes that Elina is just naturally distant, that she chooses not to be close to the family. I don't think anyone has ever told her how much Elina sacrificed for her, or how much pain the family has caused by pushing Elina away." That conversation lasted until sunrise. By the time they hung up, David had made a decision that he didn't tell Uncle Mike about. A decision that would turn my quiet goodbye letter into something much more powerful. The next morning, David started his own investigation. He began paying attention to conversations differently, listening for the things that weren't being said. When Sarah mentioned that I had always been jealous of her, David asked for specific examples. When my mother talked about how I had chosen to distance myself from the family, David asked when that started and what had precipitated it. The more questions David asked, the more the family's story fell apart. Sarah couldn't give him a single concrete example of me being jealous. When pressed, the best she could come up with was that I had seemed upset when she got into her first choice college. But when David asked Uncle Mike about it later, he learned that I had actually been working extra shifts for months to help pay for her application fees, and that I was the one who had helped her write her admission essays. My mother couldn't explain why I had chosen to distance myself because when David asked for a timeline, it became clear that I hadn't distanced myself. I had been systematically excluded. Every family tradition, every holiday gathering, every celebration had been planned around Sarah's comfort, and my comfort had never been considered. David found himself looking through photo albums at my parents' house, counting how many pictures included me versus how many included Sarah. The ratio was staggering. In over 200 family photos from the past 10 years, I appeared in fewer than 30. And in most of those, I was standing at the edge of the group, looking like I was about to step out of frame. But the moment that really broke David's heart was when he found a box of letters in Sarah's childhood bedroom. Letters I'd written to her from college, from nursing school, from my first apartment in Boston. Letters full of encouragement and love and pride in her accomplishments. Letters that Sarah had kept, but apparently never really read. One letter, written after Sarah's college graduation, stood out to David. "I'm so proud of you, little sister. Watching you walk across that stage yesterday was one of the best moments of my life. I know I couldn't stay for the whole celebration dinner because I had to catch my flight back for work. But I want you to know that being there for your graduation was worth every penny of the plane ticket I couldn't afford and every favor I had to call in to get the time off. You're going to do amazing things, Sarah. I love you so much." David showed the letter to Sarah. "Did you know she went into debt to be at your graduation?" Sarah's face went blank. "What? No, she just said she had to work. She worked double shifts for 2 months to afford the plane ticket. Uncle Mike told me. She never told you because she didn't want you to feel guilty about the expense." That was the moment Sarah started to realize that maybe she didn't know her sister as well as she thought she did. David spent the next 2 days collecting evidence like he was building a legal case. Because in a way, he was. He was building a case for my innocence in a family that had convicted me of crimes I'd never committed. He talked to our old neighbors who remembered me walking Sarah to school every day and helping her with homework on their front porch. He talked to Sarah's high school teachers who remembered me coming to parent-teacher conferences when our parents couldn't make it. He even tracked down Sarah's college roommate who told him that Sarah used to brag about her amazing older sister who sent care packages and money whenever she needed it. But the piece of evidence that sealed David's decision came from an unexpected source, Sarah herself. 3 days before the wedding, David asked Sarah to tell him about her favorite childhood memory. Without hesitation, she told him about the time she was 12 and had broken her arm falling off her bike, how I'd carried her 3 blocks home, stayed with her in the emergency room for 8 hours, and then slept on her bedroom floor for a week to help her if she needed anything in the middle of the night. "Elina was like a second mom to me," Sarah said, smiling at the memory. "I felt so safe with her. She always knew exactly what to do to make everything better." "So what happened?" David asked quietly. "What changed between you two?" Sarah's smile faded. "I don't know. She just got distant. Started acting like she was too good for family stuff. Mom says it started when she went away to college and got all these new ideas about how families should work." David realized that Sarah genuinely believed this narrative. She had been so protected from the reality of how the family treated me that she couldn't see the pattern of exclusion that had driven me away. In her mind, I had chosen to leave. She had no idea that I had been pushed out. That night, David made his decision. He was going to read my letter at the wedding. Not to humiliate my family or ruin Sarah's day, but because he realized that Sarah deserved to know the truth about the sister she was losing, and because he couldn't marry someone without making sure she understood the kind of love she was walking away from. But first, he needed to make sure Sarah's marriage would survive what he was about to do. David called his best man James and told him everything. James had met me twice, once at Sarah's engagement party, where I'd flown in just for the weekend, and once at a family barbecue the previous summer. Both times, James had commented to David afterward about how much he liked me, how funny and kind I seemed, and how strange it was that Sarah never talked about me much. "She's really not going to be at the wedding?" James asked. "I was looking forward to seeing her again." "That's the problem," David said. "Sarah's family has convinced her that Elina doesn't want to be close to them. But the truth is, they've been pushing her away for years, and now they've banned her from the wedding entirely." David read James excerpts from my letter over the phone. By the end, James was silent. "Dude," he said finally, "you have to do something. You can't let Sarah lose her sister because her family is too messed up to see what they're doing." "I know, But if I read this letter at the wedding, Sarah might never forgive me. And if you don't read it, she might never know what she's losing, which is worse. That conversation gave David the courage he needed. The next morning, he called Uncle Mike and told him the plan. "I'm going to read Elina's letter during the ceremony," David said. "When the officiant asks if anyone has a reason why we shouldn't be married, I'm going to stand up and read it." Uncle Mike was quiet for a long moment. That's going to cause a scene, David." "I know, but Mike, Sarah needs to hear this. She needs to understand what her family has done, and she needs to understand it before she gets married and potentially repeats these patterns with her own children someday. And you're willing to risk your relationship with her to make that happen?" David thought about all the evidence he'd gathered, all the stories Uncle Mike had told him, all the photos where I stood at the edges, looking like I didn't belong in my own family. He thought about the letters I'd written to Sarah, full of love and encouragement that had never been reciprocated. He thought about me sitting alone in my Boston apartment, banned from my own sister's wedding for trying to help. Mike, if Sarah can't handle the truth about how her family treats people, then maybe I shouldn't be marrying her in the first place. But I don't think that's who she is. I think she's been lied to and manipulated, and I think she deserves a chance to make things right. Uncle Mike agreed to help. He would make sure the letter was available and would signal to David when the moment was right. More importantly, he would be there to support Sarah when she heard the truth about her family for the first time. The morning of the wedding, David woke up with my letter in his jacket pocket and a speech prepared that he hoped would save not just Sarah's relationship with me, but our entire family's chance at healing. He had no idea that I was watching. I hadn't planned to watch the live stream. When Uncle Mike told me the church was streaming the ceremony for relatives who couldn't travel, I had specifically avoided looking up the link. I thought it would be too painful to see my sister get married while knowing I was banned from being there. But at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, as the ceremony was starting in Ohio, I found myself sitting on my couch in Boston with my laptop open, staring at the screen that showed my sister in her wedding dress, surrounded by 600 people who loved her enough to celebrate the most important day of her life. I watched my parents walk her down the aisle. I watched David's face light up when he saw her. I watched Uncle Mike in the third row, looking nervously at his phone and then at David. And I realized that something was about to happen that I wasn't prepared for. The ceremony proceeded normally for the first 20 minutes. Sarah and David exchanged vows that made me cry despite everything. They were beautiful together. And in that moment, I was genuinely happy for my sister, even though it hurt to watch from 800 miles away. Then Pastor Williams reached the traditional part of the ceremony. "If anyone has a reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace." In most weddings, this is a formality. A few seconds of silence, maybe a nervous laugh from the congregation, and then the ceremony continues. But David raised his hand. Even through the laptop screen, I could see the shock ripple through the crowd. Sarah's eyes went wide. My parents looked like they were about to faint. Uncle Mike sat forward in his pew, and I realized he had known this was coming. "I do have something to say," David said, his voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "But it's not a reason why Sarah and I shouldn't be married. It's a reason why we need to heal this family before we start our own." David reached into his jacket and pulled out my letter. My letter. The 7 pages I had written as a private goodbye, never intended for anyone but Sarah to read. "Sarah," David said, looking directly at his bride, "your sister Elina wrote you a letter. She wrote it after your family banned her from being here today. And I think everyone in this room, everyone who loves you and me and wants our marriage to succeed, needs to hear what she had to say." The church was completely silent. 600 people holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Sarah looked confused, hurt, and terrified all at once. "David, what are you doing?" "I'm making sure you know the truth about the sister you're losing," David said gently, "because I love you too much to let you start our marriage without understanding what love really looks like." And then, in front of 600 wedding guests, my future brother-in-law began to read my letter out loud. "Dear Sarah," he began, and even through the live stream, I could hear how his voice shook with emotion. "I'm writing this because I've been banned from your wedding, And I need you to know that I understand why. I need you to know that I'm not angry. I'm just finally ready to say goodbye. David read about the bullies I'd faced down for her, about the nights I'd held her when she was scared, about the jobs I'd worked and the money I'd sent and the sacrifices I'd made that she'd never known about all the ways I'd tried to love her from the margins, hoping that someday there would be room for me in the center of our family. He read about the phone calls that went unanswered and the visits where I felt like a stranger, about the photos where I was cropped out and the holidays where my presence was tolerated rather than celebrated, about how I'd learned to make myself smaller and smaller, hoping that if I took up less space, maybe there would be room for me somewhere. But most importantly, he read about how much I loved her, how proud I was of the woman she'd become, how I hoped that her marriage would be filled with the kind of unconditional love that I'd always wanted to give her, but had never been allowed to show. By the time David finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. Sarah was sobbing. My parents looked stricken, and Uncle Mike was nodding, tears streaming down his face as if to say, finally, someone told the truth. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice barely a whisper that the microphone just barely caught. Is that really how she feels? Is that really what happened? David folded the letter carefully and put it back in his pocket. Sarah, your sister has been trying to love you her whole life. And your family has been so busy protecting you from any discomfort that they forgot to protect her from anything at all. Sarah turned to look at our parents, still in their front row seats, looking like they wanted to disappear entirely. Is it true? She asked them. Did you really ban Elina from coming today? My mother's voice was shaky when she answered. Sweetheart, you said you didn't want any drama on your wedding day. We were just trying to... What drama? Sarah's voice was getting stronger now, fueled by a growing understanding of what had been done in her name. What drama was Elina going to cause by being at my wedding? My father cleared his throat. Sarah, this isn't the time or place for this conversation. But David stepped forward. Actually, I think this is exactly the time and place. Because in about 10 minutes, Sarah and I are going to promise to love and support each other for the rest of our lives. And I need to know that the woman I'm marrying understands what that really means. I need to know that she won't let anyone, including me, including our future children, be treated the way her sister has been treated. Sarah looked around the church at 600 faces staring back at her. Her bridesmaids, her college friends, David's family, extended relatives, family friends, all waiting to see what she would do with this moment. I want to call her, Sarah said suddenly. I want to call Elina right now. My mother started to protest, but Uncle Mike stood up from his pew. I have her number, he said loudly enough for the whole church to hear, and I think that's exactly what should happen. Uncle Mike walked to the altar and handed Sarah his phone. The church was still completely silent as she dialed my number with shaking hands. My phone rang while I was still staring at my laptop screen, tears streaming down my face, trying to process what had just happened. I almost didn't answer. The number was Ohio, but it wasn't one I recognized. Hello? Elina? Sarah's voice was thick with tears. Elina, it's me. It's Sarah. Sarah? I could barely speak. Aren't you supposed to be getting married right now? I am getting married. Right now, in front of 600 people. But I can't do it without telling you something first. I could hear the silence of the church through the phone. I could picture Sarah standing at the altar in her wedding dress, holding Uncle Mike's phone, with everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Sarah, what's going on? Elina, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't understand. David just read your letter to everyone, and I didn't know about any of it. I didn't know how much you'd sacrificed for me. I didn't know Mom and Dad had banned you from coming. I thought you just couldn't get time off work. The words hit me like a physical force. Sarah hadn't known. She hadn't been part of the decision to exclude me. She had been lied to, just like I had been lied about. Sarah, it's okay. It's your wedding day. You don't need to. No, it's not okay. Her voice was stronger now, and I could tell she was crying. It's not okay that my family made you feel like you weren't welcome. It's not okay that I'm getting married without my sister here. And it's not okay that I never knew how much you loved me because no one ever told me. I was sobbing now, sitting on my couch in Boston, listening to my sister finally see me for who I really was. I love you, Sarah. I've always loved you. Even when it felt like there wasn't room for me in our family, I never stopped loving you. I love you too, she said. And I want you here. I want you at my wedding. I want you in my life. I want to start over and do this right. Sarah, I'm in Boston. Even if I wanted to come, I couldn't get there in time. Then we'll wait, she said, and I could hear the determination in her voice. We'll wait for you to get here. This wedding isn't happening without you. I heard gasps from the congregation through the phone. Apparently, 600 people had just heard my sister decide to postpone her wedding until I could be there. Sarah, you can't postpone your wedding for me. Think about your guests, the reception, the vendors. Elina, David's voice came through the phone as he took it from Sarah. This is David. I'm the one who read your letter, and I'm the one who thinks Sarah is absolutely right. This wedding can wait a few hours, but Sarah's relationship with her sister can't wait any longer. Uncle Mike's voice came through next. Elina, honey, I'm booking you a flight right now. There's one that leaves Boston at 4:30. You can be here by 8 p.m. But I don't have anything to wear. I don't have a gift. You don't need anything but yourself, Sarah said, taking the phone back. Just please come. Please don't let Mom and Dad's mistakes keep us apart anymore. I looked around my apartment, trying to make sense of what was happening. 2 hours ago, I had been banned from my sister's wedding, resigned to watching from afar and accepting that I would never really be part of my family. Now, my sister was postponing her wedding, and 600 people were waiting for me to get on a plane. Okay, I said, the word coming out before I could stop it. Okay, I'll come. The cheer that went up from the church was audible even through the phone. 600 people celebrating the fact that the bride's sister was going to make it to the wedding after all. Pastor Williams's voice came through the speaker system. Well, folks, looks like we're having an evening wedding instead of an afternoon wedding. Let's take a break, grab some coffee from the fellowship hall, and we'll reconvene when the bride's sister arrives. 4 hours later, I was standing in the back of the same church, wearing the only dress I'd been able to find at the airport gift shop, holding a bouquet that Sarah had insisted I carry, watching my sister marry the man who had given our family a chance to heal. When Pastor Williams got to the part about objections again, David caught my eye and winked. This time, when no one spoke up, the silence felt peaceful instead of tense. Sarah and David's first dance was to a song I'd never heard before, but when it ended, Sarah walked over to where I was sitting and held out her hand. Dance with me? She asked. We danced to Sisters by Irving Berlin, and for the first time in 28 years, I felt like I belonged exactly where I was. Uncle Mike found me during the reception, tears in his eyes. You know what the best part of today was? He asked. Seeing Sarah happy? Watching your parents realize what they almost lost, he said. They spent the whole ceremony looking at you like they were seeing you for the first time. I think they finally understand what they've been doing. My parents and I had a long conversation that night. It wasn't easy, and it didn't fix everything, but it was a start. They apologized, really apologized, for the years of making me feel invisible. They acknowledged that they had failed me as parents, and they asked if I would be willing to work with them to rebuild our relationship. It's been 6 months since Sarah's wedding. We talk on the phone every week now. She's been in therapy, working through her understanding of our family dynamics and learning to see the patterns that kept me on the outside. My parents are in therapy too, trying to understand how their desire to protect Sarah led them to hurt me so deeply. I'm not going to pretend it's been easy or that everything is perfect now. 28 years of dysfunction doesn't disappear overnight. But for the first time in my adult life, I feel like I have a sister who sees me, parents who value me, and a family that wants me to be part of it. Sarah asked me to be her maid of honor at their 1-year anniversary vow renewal. The first wedding was beautiful, she said, but it wasn't complete without you there from the beginning. And David. David has become the brother I never knew I needed, the person who saw the truth about our family when no one else could, and who loved Sarah enough to risk their relationship to make sure she knew what real love looked like. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry about all those years of being pushed aside, all those missed moments and family celebrations where I wasn't welcome. The honest answer is that I was angry for a long time, but I'm not anymore. Because I learned something important from all of this. Love isn't just about being there for the good times. It's about being willing to tell the truth, even when it's hard. It's about fighting for the people you care about, even when they can't fight for themselves. And sometimes it's about writing a letter that you never intended anyone else to read, trusting that somehow, some way, the truth will find its way to the people who need to hear it. That letter saved my family, but more importantly, it saved me. I'm not the invisible daughter anymore. I'm not the family scapegoat or the convenient target for everyone else's problems. I'm Elina Chen. Yes, I took David's last name too because Sarah insisted we should all be one family. And I'm exactly where I belong. Have you ever written a letter you were afraid to send? Have you ever told a truth that you thought might destroy everything, only to discover that it was the truth that saved everything instead? Because that's what happened to me. And if you're sitting there right now feeling invisible in your own family, feeling like you don't matter or that your voice doesn't count, I want you to know something. Your truth matters. Your voice matters. And somewhere out there, there's someone who needs to hear exactly what you have to say. Write the letter. Tell the truth. Trust that love, real love, is strong enough to handle honesty. Sometimes the people who love us need to hear the hardest truths of all.